Welcome to the Pilates Fundamentals. This video is meant to be an instructional video to teach you the fundamentals of Pilates. I call these the building blocks. They are the little movements and skills that basically make up Pilates, but also just good movement in general. So this video is going to be pretty instructional. You're going to want to just watch it the first time and then go back and try it and try the things in your body. These fundamentals are super important, and the more you understand them and the more you practice them, the more the rest of the Pilates exercises will make sense, and you'll be able to adjust the exercises better in your body if you know these kind of fundamental skills. All right, let's get started. Let's start with breath. Breath is an integral part of the Pilates method of exercise. Throughout your Pilates practice, you're going to incorporate your breath in a way that coordinates with your movement. Some of our goals with our breath are basically to kind of, I call it like training to breathe better. Most of us, when on a day-to-day basis, kind of don't use the full capacity of our breath. So when we're practicing Pilates, we're going to be practicing, can we take inhales where we breathe in as much air as we can. We use our muscles, we pull that breath in, expand our chest, and then as we exhale, we force out that breath, squeezing out every last drop of breath. And what this does is that trains our body to be a better breather. Right? It trains our muscles and our body to breathe better, so that's super important. The other important thing that breath does when we're moving, it kind of connects us. Having to think about coordinating your breath with your movement makes us focus, makes us find control, and that's something we're always working toward in Pilates. All right, I'm gonna lay down on my mat and go over some ways to breathe. So I'm gonna lay myself back. I'm going to take my hands and put them around my rib cage. So when I'm breathing, I love to get an image in my head. My favorite is a red balloon. So when I inhale, I'm picturing my head a little deflated red balloon that's not blown up yet. When I inhale, I want to blow the balloon up as big as I can. So when it blows up, it gets really big, and the rib cage, it's my balloon in my mind. And then when I exhale, I'm going to force all the breath out and shrink my balloon. Okay, and then I'm going to do that again. I'm going to inhale, fill up, and then exhale. Squeezing out all of my breath. Right? And that's all I want you to start with is, could you get that inhale? Kind of feels like work. You gotta pull in, you feel your rib cage expand in the back and in the sides and then in the front. And then as you exhale, you squeeze out all of that breath. And if your hands are on your rib cage, you can kind of feel everything kind of shrink in. Right? Nice long big inhale. And then nice long exhales. And traditionally in Pilates, we will exhale out our mouth. So you can maybe notice that I was doing that. So I'm inhaling through my nose. And then I'm going to open my mouth and exhale. Now if that doesn't work for you, you want to exhale out your nose, it's fine. One of the things I want to talk about with breath is what I like to remind everybody in the beginning when you're practicing Pilates, there's a lot to think about. We're going to be breathing, moving our bodies, trying to coordinate our breath and movement. Excuse me. So if you're doing your Pilates practice and maybe your teacher is saying, we're going to inhale here and exhale at this point, and you're like, oh, I'm exhaling, or I don't have my breath right. It's really not that big of a deal. Most important thing is to remember to breathe. My My favorite saying is that breath is a tool, not a rule. Right? We want to use our breath to help us move better. We want to use our breath to help us connect to our body. So don't get over worried about your breath. You'll get lots of practice because every time you move, we're coming back to that breath. Our next fundamental is core engagement, abdominal work, how to move from your center. So this fundamental, super important, something that we do all the time in Pilates, so I want to take some time to go over it. I'm going to demonstrate this laying down on my mat. So we already learned our breath, right? And if I were to just lay on the mat, kind of just relaxed, right? Not trying to work, my hips are just kind of nice and relaxed. I'm not tilting my hips or tucking my hips, I'm just laying here. For me, it helps to put my hands on my stomach. If that helps you, definitely do that. I'm kind of have my hands in between the bottom of my rib cage and the tops of my hips. So we're taking our big Pilates breath that we just practiced, that big full inhale. And then we're going to do the forceful exhale out of our mouth. And when you do that, you might automatically feel your stomach muscles engage. And what that feels like to me is when I do the forceful exhale, my stomach muscles kind of pull down toward the mat and almost up. Right? They're engaging to help force that breath out. That engagement is basically your core engagement that we want when we're doing Pilates, except we're going to be really like on purpose and specific about it. We're going to be pulling in our stomach. So if I let go, if you can see that a little bit, I kind of just let go with my stomach and don't engage, I'm here. I'm going to take an inhale first. Exhale, you can see how my hands kind of sink down. It feels like my belly button pulled down toward my mat. It's a very internal pulling in feeling. My favorite image on this is imagine you had one of those old-fashioned corsets on from I guess of corsets are old-fashioned from, right? It went all the way from like your rib cage down to your hips. It wrapped around you. It was all laced up. And you had strings on it. And you just took those strings and you squeezed them or pulled them, right? And what would happen? You'd be like, oh, I gotta pull everything in. I gotta suck everything in. That's kind of what it feels like, that pulling in sensation. Another image that I love is if you were laying there on the mat, what if somebody came over and stood on your stomach? What would you do? You would kind of tense and pull in and get those muscles all tight and engaged, right? Because you don't want to, it would hurt if you weren't ready for it and they just pressed in. That's those core muscles. That's that engagement that we want. And what I love to tell everybody is if you're doing Pilates, and I don't care what you're doing, where you're at, what exercise you're doing, if you're doing something and you're like, ooh, should I be doing that thing where I pull my stomach in and engage those core muscles? The answer is yes, always. Always, always, right? You're like, it's always going to help you move better. You're going to move from your center, right? We're going to keep those core muscles engaged. And that's what we want. We want to train those muscles to be strong and work when we're doing Pilates so that when we get out into our day-to-day life, we don't have to think about it. We don't have to pull them in all day, but when we go, to do something, those muscles will know to engage. Now, that being said, I always like to tell people, now, if you're going to go pick up a heavy box or something like that, yes, by all means, tighten those stomach muscles in because they are acting like a corset around your center and they give you a support system. So they're going to protect your back, right? So super important to have them engaged. And especially when you're first starting Pilates, I'm just going to tell you, you will forget to engage those muscles. You'll be thinking about moving your arm and your leg, and then you're like, oh, I got to pull my stomach in. That's okay. You'll figure it out. And the best thing you can do is just keep, when you catch yourself not doing it, then you do it. And the more you do that, it just takes practice. The better you get at doing it, your body will kind of do it automatically. And you're going to get stronger. You're going to feel the benefits of that strong core. All right, we are going to talk next about hip stability. So I want to take a little moment and talk about our Pilates exercises, because I often tell people that Pilates exercises, and there are a lot of them. Joseph Pilates created hundreds of exercises on the mat, on the equipment, all these exercises, but they can all be categorized into two different types of exercises. I call them stability exercises and move your spine exercises. So stability exercises are where we put our back, our spine, from our head to our tail in a position, and we use our muscles to hold our back still while we do fun things with our arms and our legs. And that challenges our core muscles, it challenges our whole body to maintain stability in our back. And then the other types of exercises are exercises where we move through our spine. Joseph Pilates was kind of fanatic about the importance of a healthy, mobile spine. So he knew that your back had to have lots of good mobility and range and be healthy, otherwise we don't feel good, right? So all the rest of the exercises are exercises where we kind of anchor our hips and our legs into place, and we do things like curl through our spine and stack back up, or we twist, or we rotate. And when we do those movements, we try to do them very segmentally through our spine. So we curl, we call it one vertebra at a time. We don't just like hinge forward. We round and curl down and stack back up. So those are all of our articulation exercises or move your spine exercises. So back to stability, we're going to talk about some fundamentals that are specific to stability. And the first one is hip stability. All right, so what's it mean to keep your hips still? I'm gonna lay back on my mat. So when I'm talking about hips, if you put your hands on your hips, you can kind of feel like your hip bones. You may hear me refer to your pubic bone, which is here, right? And where it is in space. You may hear me refer to your sitting bones. And if you don't know what those are, they're down here on our butt. If you were to, I'm gonna just sit up for a minute. If you were to sit up and be sitting, you can kind of sit on those two bony parts of our butt. Those are, we call them our sitting bones. They're actually called the ischial tuberosities, if we want to get technical, but we don't have to call them our sitting bones. So you may hear me refer to those points. So when I lay down on the mat, I want to just I'm laying in what I would call my neutral position. Neutral in our Pilates world is just, if you were to lay down and not work to be anywhere with your hips, where would you be? Most of us have a little bit of space under our low back, which is natural. We got a little space of some sort under our neck, and that's natural too, and we're just kind of relaxed here. Right? Now, if I wanted to keep myself in this position while I started to do some things with my legs, I would have to use my muscles, right? So that's what we're gonna do. So the idea is, can my hips stay in the same space, and can my back stay in the same space while I do some things with my legs? So to do that, first I want to set up and I want to think about that breath that we just practiced. I want to think about that core work. So I'm pulling my stomach muscles in, and I'm kind of pushing my feet down into the mat a little bit, which activates through my legs a little bit on there. All right, so the first thing we're going to do to see if we can keep this stable, our hips and our back, is we're going to do what we call a knee fold. And I'm going to take an inhale, and I'm just going to nice and slow bring my leg up to tabletop. And you may hear me call this tabletop. Let me explain quick. Tabletop is like, I could sit a drink there on my shin, right? It wouldn't spill. You'll hear me refer to that with our leg position. And then you're going to come back down to the mat, and then we're going to switch to the other side. I'm going to bring the leg up, and then you're going to bring it back down. And it might seem like kind of a simple movement, but I want to be kind of super picky so that when my leg comes down, I don't do any shifts. And I could do this kind of, I'm going to call it the sloppy version, where I kind of do this, and I don't know if you can see, I'm kind of moving around I'm shifting weight side to side. But if I'm being stable in my hips, it should feel like it should feel like a little work from those stomach muscles pulling in and through our legs and hips a little bit. And you should not feel any weight shift in your hips when you do that. So it's good. I inhale, come up, exhale, come down. So for me, that is work right here. When one foot comes down, I gotta really tighten in so that I'm not moving through here, and then bring the other leg up and come back down. And if you're starting to feel like, okay, I think I got this, we can make it a little more challenging, and I could say, let's bring your leg up to tabletop. Now you're gonna really wanna tighten your stomach muscles in because we're lifting both legs, and that's more work. So stomach muscles pulled in, almost feels like you're trying to glue your low back down toward the mat, and then lift the other leg up. And if this feels like too much on your back, you'll just take your foot down. If it feels okay, we'll just stay here a moment, which should feel like some work to pull your stomach muscles in. What we don't want is this, and we don't want our stomach muscles pushing out, or we don't want any extra space in our back. We're pulling in. And then if you're feeling comfortable there, you could challenge yourself by taking your right leg and lowering it down away from you. How far can you go before your back wants to arch and come back? It does not need to be very big, and then you could alternate. Lower the leg down a little and bring it back. Right? My stomach muscles are working like crazy. Yours should be too if you're practicing this, pulling your stomach in and just seeing like, ooh, how far can I go and not arch my back. And eventually you might get down where you can take it all the way, tap it on the mat, and come back up. All right. And then if you were like, ooh, we're doing pretty good at that, we could make it a little more challenging by taking both legs away, which will feel super harder because now we have both of our legs, both of our levers out here going away. And our back's gonna wanna do this. Your job is to keep it in place and stomach muscles in and then come back. So this one, if you're just moving like an inch, totally fine. Lower it away a little and bring it back. All right, give those legs a little hug in towards you and then come back down. So this is that idea of hip stability, back stability, while we do fun things with our legs, which happens to be move them around in space. So number one of our stability fundamentals is hip stability and essentially back stability. Our next fundamental is shoulder stability. Shoulder stability refers to basically keeping your shoulder blades stable on your back while your arm does a variety of movements. Our arm and our shoulder socket, let's say, has this nice big range of motion. It is designed so that we can do all kinds of fun stuff. So learning to stabilize our shoulder blades so that even if your arm's way out here in space, if your shoulder blade is stable and strong and in place, you're not gonna get injured. You're gonna have strength in like all of your ranges. So that's why it's so important. All right, so let's go over this concept. I'm gonna lay back on my mat. I like to teach this by starting off and just take one hand and kind of lay it over the bottom of your rib cage so you can feel your ribs a little bit. And then with the other arm, I'm gonna have my arm super straight. I call it like the Barbie doll arm or like a soldier arm, toy soldier arm kind of thing, right? You can see like here's my floppy arm. I'm gonna like straighten and engage my muscles. And what I wanna play with is when I lift my arm up and it's nice and straight, I wanna feel like my upper arm bone is really in my shoulder socket and I'm using my muscles to kind of hold it there. So what you'll find is you start to lift your arm higher, this gets to be more work when your arm is back here. If I don't work, then my shoulder ends up like doing this kind of thing. Right? But if I'm really, as I start to come up here, I'm gonna see like how far up can I go and keep my arm, it feels like that upper arm bone is kind of pulling into my shoulder socket. So this feels like some work for me. And then coming back, I'm kind of making the little adjustments. I'm using my muscles as I come back down. Now I had to put this other hand here because when we do this, we also want to think that our spine stays stable and our rib cage. And a common thing that'll happen is we go to lift our arm, we're thinking about pulling our shoulder in, and to get more range, we'll do things like this, where we kind of pop up our rib cage up. So if your hand's here, sometimes that just gives us a little more awareness that we're not moving our rib cage to get our arm to move more. All right, so try that maybe just a time or two where you're gonna inhale
lift up. Now we're still thinking about our stomach pulling in. We're still thinking about our breath, and then exhale as you come back down. And then you'll just want to switch, right? Try the same thing on the other side. So sometimes one side has a bigger range than the other side. That could be due to an injury. That could be due just to like you have one arm that you use more than the other. We all have little imbalances in our body as you lift your arm and come back. If you have any pain when you're starting to lift this arm overhead, you want to stop before that, right? Pain is a sign from your body. It could be pinching, impingement up overhead. So you're only going to take your arm to the place where you cannot have pain, where you feel like you can pretty well keep your arm pulled into your shoulder socket and not want to like let your shoulder scrunch up overhead as you're moving around. And then you could take that to more of an exercise where we're thinking about our breath, we're thinking about our core work because we don't want our back to move. And then could we do something like an arm circle where you're going to inhale, lift up, and just to that place where you can keep stable, exhale, open and circle as you come back around. I'm going to flip my palms back over and do that again. Inhaling, arms lift up, and they work to pull into my shoulder sockets, and then come back around. And then you could reverse that and go the other way. You're going to reach out first, and you have to navigate way out here in space. What do you have to do with your muscles to pull your arms into your shoulder sockets and come back down? All right, so that is our idea of shoulder stability. And I often kind of think of shoulder stability as like good posture shoulders, right? So, you know, I feel like this tends to be where most of us want to go, like we get tense or tight or things like that, or we're sitting at the computer doing this kind of thing. When we're thinking about shoulder stability, we want our shoulder blades kind of down our back in place, and we want to avoid doing that kind of thing. So that's just my little thing I think about is like, those are my good posture shoulders. All right, we have went over our fundamentals that are focused around keeping our spine stable while we do movements with our arms and legs. Now we're going to talk about some of the, I'm going to call them the mobility fundamentals, the ones that have to do with moving through our spine. So the first one we're going to talk about is pelvic tuck, pelvic arch, or you might hear it called posterior tilt, anterior tilt of your pelvis. So what I'm going to do for this, to show this, and I'm sure most people have done a version of this little fundamental, that you've probably done something like this before. My feet are about hip width apart. Maybe a fist in between the inside edges of my feet. If they need to be a little wider, that's fine. We're back in our neutral position. So this is that place where we just laid on the mat, got a little, probably a little space in your low back. Some people have more space, some people have less, it's fine. And you're just gonna relax through your hips. You're not tucking or arching yet, right? And then this skill that we're going to do is just, can we move our pelvis? Can we move just our hips? So remember I was talking earlier about those sitting bones, our butt bones. What I want you to think about is that you are going to lift your sitting bones, okay, and pull your stomach in, and I'm pushing my feet in so that my low back gets a little extra round, and it feels like I'm using my tush, using my butt a little bit, right? And then I'm going to reverse that, which feels like I'm rolling through my sacrum, or that bone on the back of my hips, and I'm going to come back to where I started. So that would be our tuck. And it's just this push our feet in, tilt, pull my stomach in, and I'm not lifting yet. I'm not doing this yet. I'm really just tilting my pelvis backwards, pulling my stomach in. For me, that feels like a little stretch in my low back. That feels good. And what I find is that the more you do it, the more mobility you get in your back, right? The more you practice it, which is what we want. We want that articulation, that moving through our back. And then release. Now the pelvic arch, as you might guess, is the other way. So here, most of us already have a little space in our low back, and this, like, we're back to that neutral position. Now I'm gonna tip my pubic bone away from me, and this is a little movement for me, but it does create more space here underneath my low back. and then I'm going to come back to center. So it is a tip my pubic bone away, create a little space, and then come back. And are we breathing on this? Of course. Inhale, coordinate your breath, tip away. Are we pulling our stomach muscles in? Of course. Exhale to come back. Right? So that is our pelvic tuck and arch. And I often call that, you'll hear me refer to kind of when we're rolling through our spine, we often initiate movement from our head, or I say our tail, or our hips, even though we don't really have a tail. So just to give you an example, so a bridge that we would do in Pilates would start with that pelvic tuck, where we lift our sitting bones, and then we would keep that tucking action going, and we would peel our spine up off the mat part way, and then we would come down and we would curl through our back, but it's important to keep that tuck, right? So it feels like my sitting bones are lifting up, and I'm tilting my pelvis all the way down, and then at the very end, I release it to come back down. So an important skill. So that is our pelvic tuck, pelvic arch fundamental. Our next fundamental is a mobility fundamental. So it's a skill we use when we're moving through our spine, and it's called the upper ab curl. Sometimes it gets called the chest lift. So we started and we talked about moving our hips. Now we're going to talk about when we start moving from our head. So if I was in a seated position, I'm going to sit and uncross my legs here. If I was in a seated position, this action would be, if I wanted to move kind of segmentally through my spine, I would nod my chin toward my chest. If I was starting kind of sitting tall here, I would nod chin toward chest, and I would start curling through, like pull my sternum in and curl through my upper back. For me, this feels like, sorry if you're a guy, but the girls, like you're kind of bending. You get to this place where you're like bending at your bra line, and then you're stacking to come back up, kind of unrolling your spine as you come up seated. Now when we do this, that action, laying down on a mat, that's when we call it our upper ab curl. So I'm going to plant my feet again. I'm going to keep my stomach muscles pulled in. And I'm going to do this the first time with my hands back behind my head, because I want to give my head just a little bit of support system. Now the key with hands behind head is I don't want you to yank on your neck. I want you to put your hands back behind your head, and I want you to kind of push your head backwards, like you're pushing your head into your hands. And when you do that, you should feel like your neck kind of lengthens. I'll use my hands to almost pull this way and feel like I'm lengthening my neck a little bit. Right, so this action to come up, I'm going to take a nice big inhale, and then as I exhale, I'm going to gently nod my chin toward my chest, and I'm going to try to do that curling up, which again feels like I get to about my bra line, and it is some core work to curl up. And then I'm going to roll back down, and I want to kind of piece by piece roll through my upper back. The last thing I do is kind of unroll through my neck and land my head back on the mat. Right, so some key things on this. This is an exercise that's really easy to kind of, I hate to say do wrong, but do wrong and feel like you're just using your neck to curl up. So when you come up, when you start to curl up, you don't want to overreach with your neck. It's not about that. You want to, when you start coming up, you want to keep your head kind of pushed back into your hands, and then those stomach muscles are pulling in. That's what gets that curl through your back. And once you get here, check in. Could you push your head back into your hands a little more? So it doesn't feel like you're using your neck. I should be able to be here and kind of not really feel my neck. Move my head around. My focus is on those core muscles holding me up there. And then I'm slowly rolling myself down, lengthening as I come back down. So that upper ab curl takes a lot of core strength. If you're feeling any strain in your neck, I would say readjust. See if you can do it without feeling that strain. If you have anything going on in your neck that you shouldn't be doing this, it's totally fine. And we'll talk about this more as we do some other exercises as you get into your exercises. But all of the exercises in Pilates that are done here can be done with your head down on the mat. And so if you have maybe a fusion in your neck, you have some pain, anything going on your neck where that doesn't feel good, or you've been told like you shouldn't be doing things like that, then you'll just not do it as you're up there. All right, so that is the upper ab curl fundamental.